This is why I love cold therapy. It saved my life. Everything changes when we step into the cold.
Hi, Zach. Welcome to the Stepping Into the Cold podcast. It's great to have you here. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Dean, thank you so much for having me on here. I am a fellow cold dipper, cold advocate. I've been doing this for the past 2 years. I started doing it to sort of shorten the crazy long winters here that we get in Canada. As I'm sure you know, there is the myths and stories of Canadians living up in the Great White North. And it's half true. For about 6 months of the year, we're trapped in the winter. And I couldn't figure out, like, what do I do during the winter? Because I don't ski, I don't snowboard, I don't participate in winter activities. And myself and a group of friends sort of were getting frustrated, especially as I think most of us were getting locked up during COVID times and really didn't know what to do in that period of time. And myself and one of my good friends were just starting to get like depressed with like not being able to do anything. And even winter activities here in Canada were restricted. So we're like, well, what do we do? Well, we've got a lot of open bodies of water and there's this fun thing called cold dipping. So that was sort of what established all of that, but I'm sure we'll dive deeper into that further in the combo.
So let's just talk a little bit about what you got, why you got started into cold therapy. You talked a little bit about COVID. Was it the mental health aspect that really sort of drove you in, or was it sort of that you saw quite a lot sort of traction on social media, Wim Hof, and a lot of people were doing it and seeing how these people had started to transform and all these great results? What was it that really got you or you and your friends to step over the line and take the plunge?
Yeah, great question. So originally, when it came into doing cold exposure, I'd only watched a documentary about it years prior on Wim Hof. There was this 1 hour special on Vice that sort of dove into it. And then I tried it once, like at a buddy's house, like he had converted a old trash can into like a cold tank. And I did it once. I was like, whoa, this is cool. I took a video of it and that was basically it. I'm like, I'm never doing that again. I felt fantastic, but I never really thought of it being anything that I would, put into my routine. And sure enough, fast forward a few years, me and my good friend were at our cottage and we just started going into the cold water, not as a therapeutic thing, not as a thing that we saw on social media, but just as something to do. And we recognized when we had done it the first time, how good our bodies felt. And so it was more or less chasing that physical high, not really recognizing any of the physical benefits, any sort of the trends that were on the internet, or really following the path of Wim Hof. It was just, this felt good, let's keep doing it. And sure enough, that sort of grew into a community of things or a community that people clinged on to here in Toronto, Ontario. So we went from doing it at our cottage to then migrating to doing it at a beach in Toronto with a group of friends. And that slowly grew into a brand that was titled Unbounded, which we sort of grew from just doing these like group dips in the city, and myself, Nick McNaught, Lisa, and Ron grew this from just getting together and doing something fun that felt good.
So I think it was that a video. I saw a video, and you must have shot the video, which was a big line of people in the sea. So from just a few of you and a few of your friends as transcribed into this big community, this tribe of cold therapy goers. I just want to quickly step it back, because you said before you and your friends went off, you talked about that your friend had a barrel in his back garden. I just want to, do you remember that first experience?
Yeah, so things have escalated completely, and it started from being in a little garbage bin in a friend's backyard to then 400 people on a beach in Ontario. And that first dip that I did, I can remember because there was a video of me doing it, and I remember how painful it was and how much I was really trying to like just suppress all of my pain during that process. But there's a really interesting thing, and cold exposure does this, which I'm sure you're aware of, which is, our brains create memories, obviously through good things. And, if you have a beautiful beach sunset, you're going to, retain that, or a great memory with a good friend. But, fortunately and unfortunately, we also retain traumatic experiences and things that are painful and uncomfortable. And the fun sort of memory hack, I know a lot of cold exposure is about biohacking, but a cool memory hack is the fact that when you go into a stressful situation voluntarily and you do that on your own terms, you're actually able to create memories through stressful situations. And that memory is even more concrete than perhaps even a good memory of, let's say, experiencing a beautiful sunset or having a couple beers with your friends on a patio. And so that experience of me doing my first dip in that dumpster, that sounds terrible. I did not dip in a dumpster. I dipped in a trash bin on my friend's patio. Going into that, associating that memory with that experience is, I can remember every single second of that first and pretty much second and third dip that I've ever done, because it's almost like flagged in my brain with the trauma that was attached to it.
So just so clearly you had your fight or flight response that was triggered. What was it that do you know how long you did? Do you know how cold the water was? And was it that you had the support of your friends there? Was it willpower that kept you in that bit longer? Just describe that process, because it's that first process, it's those first few steps that really where people struggle or give up on the process, and that's the most important part, is breaking through that barrier.
100%. And so my first few dips, as like most people's, it's the excitement of doing something new and pushing beyond a comfort zone that is really the fuel that drives that vehicle. And that paired with ego, which is also, I think, something to discuss in this sort of process, really made me withstand that situation. I was not sitting there in the cold being like, this is good for my inflammation or my health or mental health. I was just like, this looks cool for me in a video doing this. I know that I'm going to feel okay afterwards, but I'm literally just doing this for the duration to say that I did it. Now, that's me being completely honest and vulnerable in that situation, explaining the first time. But then the second, third, fourth, and fifth, all of a sudden it was like, well, I'm no longer doing this for my ego because I checked the box. And then the second dip that I did, it was like, okay, it's not about the ego, it's just about the feeling. And then once it was past the feeling, it was more or less just about the mental health benefits and how I was processing the world after. So if you think about, your first, second, and third dip, I think the first dip is sort of about the current moment, or the before. So that like psyching yourself out. Oh my God, what's happening? The second dip is about the during. So you're like, oh my God, my whole body's so cold. And you're really in present to that process. And then your third dip is kind of about the post, which is after. You're more focused on, well, how am I going to feel in that post feeling? I already know what the before and the during are like, and I'm really present to those two things. But I really found by the time I dipped the third and then, the next 100, 200, 300 times, I really was excited about the after. Where was I going to feel in that position? And the repetition makes the master. So the more you do it, the better you get at it, and the more you're able to gain new lessons from that experience. And no dip is ever the same. If you talk to anybody who does cold dipping, they'll say that, every dip almost kind of still feels like your first because of how present you are throughout that process. And so with that, you're able to take little kernels of wisdom throughout that because your body is so activated. It's not just your legs that are touching the water, or your waist, or your nipples when they hit the ice, or your vagus nerve. It's your mind, it's the tingles on the edges of your skin, it's your fingers that are in pain, your toes. And while those sensations aren't an attractive thing, when you understand the values to which it provides beyond just the scientific, removing things like inflammation or reducing so many other problems within the body, when you go beyond the scientific things and think of just where's my brain going to be at after this, where's my mental health going to be, it truly is an incredible experience.
Yeah, I really like the way that you put that, and especially when you said that the things beyond the scientific. Like I first started, I had a life-changing injury. I was on a lot of medication, and it was sort of, I hit a crossroads, and I stepped in first of all just for my health, to become pain-free, get off all the medication, which I did, and I was never expecting the mental transformation. So it was when you was talking about your process, and that you had these three first steps of going in. Do you know how long it took you really to break that fight or flight barrier? Do you still get a little bit of nervousness, excitement of just before you're getting in, especially in winter temperatures when you know it's really cold? And is it that endorphin release? Is it that first diaphragmatic breath? What is it that you love that first, like when you're first stepping in?
Yeah, it's a great question. I want to circle it back to yours too, because I always find this part so interesting because, like I said before, every dip still feels like your first, even though I've done probably about 300 to 400 dips at this point. And when I say dip, I mean going into cold water that's that's around 4 degrees or possibly even lower. And when you go into that, despite being, I don't want to say veteran, but to be an experienced person in doing this, every time I still get the butterflies, I still get nervous, even when my body goes into it. And up until the bliss point, which is typically up until that 30-second mark or minute mark. Like once you make it to the minute mark, you're pretty good. But that stimulation your brain goes through in that first, 30 seconds, even though I've done that 30 seconds, if we were to, put it all together, that first 30 seconds and multiply that by 300, I've done a lot of firsts in the water, and I've done it so many times, my brain still goes to, I'm going to die. There's something wrong that's going to happen. Like for some reason, I don't know why. I don't know if other people go through this, but my brain decides to go into the flight mode every time and makes up the most ridiculous justification of why I should get out of it. It's like, I'm in a lake, first of all. So when I go into a lake, my brain will be like, well, the ice is going to like come in and cut you in half. It's like, no, it's not going to happen. Well, there's sharks in here. No, it's a lake. Well, you're gonna, and it just decides to go in these directions, which actually is interesting, because if you know that your brain is capable of doing that and you're able to talk it down off the edge from those experiences, then that gives you a certain material to use the same formula in other situations in life. When your brain decides to go into that flight mode, when let's say you're in a conflict in your day-to-day, maybe it's with your spouse or with your friend, a conflict at work, a stressful situation, even like stuck in traffic, and your brain is going to these unlogical road, like it's kind of using this hack to go to this roadmap of being like, F this, I'm trying to get out of here.
Yeah.
When you know how to operate in those situations, and cold exposure really creates, I think, the best education on how to navigate your brain in those situations. When you know how to operate in those, you're able to approach them completely differently. And so Eve, I know how to talk myself down way faster now. I know to be like, hey, like it's instead of being the first full minute now of being like uncomfortable in my brain doing the monkey mind, it's more like 15 seconds. I'm like, hey, all right, we're not going to die. We're going to be fine. I'm not going to get electrocuted. There's no sharks in here. The ice isn't going to cut me in half. And because I've been able to do that, I'm able to approach so many other challenges in life with that same sort of mind hacking.
Yeah. So my first trip to Toronto, I went to a Bob Proctor event, and I'd most probably been doing cold showers for about 6 months. And I was in the hotel, because you guys have got a really cold, like natural water table. And that was a shock for me. So having that all year round available to you is something that I strive for. But your tolerance, so you would be able to come here and you know, the coldest it really gets here is maybe 5-6 degrees. You might get the sea a little bit colder, but for you, that's a very daily occurrence. And for us, that's.
I wanna interject there. I would love to come across here as like some cold warrior hero who is like a-okay with cold water. I go to the beach still and the water is like maybe 10 degrees and I'm still like, oh my God. Like I still do the thing. I actually started cold exposure to be like, I don't want to be that dweeb who goes on the beach and who like walks with their hands out of the water and like procrastinates to get their nipples in.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm going to master cold exposure so I can beat this. And I still go through it. I really wish I could be that heroic dude. So despite it, you know, me willingly doing this, I still have struggles even going into relatively warm water. And you know, our water table, the water does get tremendously colder in our showers during the winter season. So basically starting let's say October until March, April, our water is pretty cold. Throughout the summer season, our water does get warmer in our showers or baths and that sort of stuff. So we still have to use different hacks. So for example, like what we've done, because we're crazy obsessed cold exposure people here, is we've taken chest freezer and converted that into our own sort of backyard cold tank. And so by caulking the edges and putting in a water filter and a cooling system, it is able to be our backyard DIY cold tank for the summer season until that water freezes over. I want to back up to your experience in Toronto, but I just wanted to address that it's still a thing.
No, so just when you're about to go in, do you run and dive in, or because obviously your water temperature is much lower. So when we do it, we dive straight in. Obviously, we don't teach anybody that, but when I'm with my brothers, we go in. You know, that's an experience that we have on ourselves. And I personally love getting my head wet and taking that experience in and just really inducing those endorphins, the big diaphragmatic breath, and then just stepping away and just having that feeling just rush over me. It's a personal preference, and obviously anybody that's starting, never recommend obviously anybody putting their head under. That's something that comes with time. But coming back to the experience, so at the time I was living in Marbella in Spain, which is a very sunny place of 300 days a year sunshine. The temperature never drops below 16 degrees. So in the summer, so I've just come back from Spain now, and the temperature was 23 degrees, the cold water. So I was using the cryo shower unit, but going from sort of like a 20 degree it was in June, so it must have been about 8 degrees. For me, only 6 months into my journey, it was a shock to the system. But I am aware of the sort of Canadian water table. So Zach, I just want to bring it back. So you gave so much insight and so much value that people can take away from. But really what I want to bring it back to is what, if anything, has cold therapy personally taught you about yourself, about that mental chatter? Is it something that you've been able to take out of the water, but into the workplace, into the real world environment? You know, those tools of quieting the mind and stuff, the tools that you use in everyday life, and, you know, what has it taught you, and, you know, how do you use that in everyday life?
Yeah, so one of the things that I recognized with doing cold exposure was the value of routine. And I'm personally someone who absolutely loves routine, and I try to have sort of morning routine, afternoon routine, and evening routines. And then everything else in between is just sort of, you know, what day-to-day life throws at you. But that morning routine is like, for me, it's like going for the walk, doing the breath work, making coffee, and then getting into work. And then, you know, afternoon is like a workout. And then, you know, I work out in sauna. And then evening is whatever that might bring me. And what I found is cold exposure, when I constructed a bit of a routine around it, it really was sort of the best form for mental health and daily structure. So doing a breath work at the beginning, then maybe bringing my journal for afterwards. Actually, scratch that. I tried doing that and my hands like, go try to journal. It's so hard. So I journaled before it. And then actually doing the practice and then getting out, what I found was having that was a sort of an hour routine. A lot of people are like, oh, well, how can cold exposure be an hour? You're only in there for 2 to 3 minutes. God forbid you're in there for an hour. Why it's so long is, you drive to the spot, you're out in nature, you connect with people who are doing it. The pre is probably 15 minutes. The during is about 5 minutes. Then when you come out, the warm up, the reconnection, getting back to your spot, it's a full hour experience. And what I found was spending an hour on literally just physical body, the sensation, overcoming an obstacle, spending time in that stillness, something that is, I think, not known within doing cold exposure. It almost sort of seems opposite. And it sounds weird to anyone who hasn't done it, is the fact that it's actually really peaceful. And despite it seeming like this insane thing, it'd almost be like someone who does skydiving being like, yeah, it's really relaxing jumping out of an airplane. It is really relaxing once the monkey chatter softens after that 30 seconds. It's so quiet, especially here in Canada. Whenever you go into, let's say, an ice hole, the water is completely frozen. So you don't even have movement in the water. You're literally just in this completely still area. You might get the wind, odd wind that moves the trees, or you can see the little snow cut across. But outside of that, there's not many other situations in your life where there's complete stillness. And when your body starts to relax in that moment, you really start to connect with nature and the stuff that's in your mind. And I actually liken it to being more of like a psychedelic experience than anything, because you feel, when your body is fully engaged in that moment, like every muscle is firing, but your brain is calm, what that happens is you're fully connected to nature. Your whole body is completely engaged with the water, the trees, the wind, the earth. And so in those moments, I think those are some of the greatest lessons that I gained, because I'm completely engaged with my environment. And then sort of relating back to what I said earlier was I've been able to combat stressful situations in a much better manner because I'm so much more trained to do that. The same way you probably, someone who is trained to be in sort of conflict situations, whether you work in, military or police or whatever, and how people have been trained to sort of be in those situations. I actually find that cold exposure is sort of daily training to be able to be in stressful situations and how to handle them better.
Wow. From a lifestyle perspective, has much changed from sort of just your general lifestyle? So from when you got started, what was a typical day like for you before you sort of got onto this journey to sort of where you are now?
So it's so funny because when you actually get to experience the greener grass on the other side, and there actually is stuff, you recognize that, oh man, like it sets your baseline a lot higher. And you also recognize when you get to taste the fruit of something that's actually cheaper, it's for free, and there's people that are attached to it, you recognize that all those other habits that you use to fill that gap are no longer necessary. So for example, to make my body feel good, maybe I would go out and to make my body feel good and to socialize, maybe I would go out drinking with a group of friends, and I would fill my sort of afternoon or my evening by doing that. Or a weekend activity, be, oh, let's all get together, we'll have some drinks at our place, or we'll go do this recreational thing together. And now we have this unbelievable community here in Toronto, Ontario, and also in Vancouver, BC, and a couple other places with Unbounded, where there are other people who don't want to go to a loud bar to connect and get drunk and actually forget that experience. There's people now in my circle who want to go out in nature, have that full engaged experience, and have an experience where you can legitimately remember every single second of that. And so now that I've experienced that and I've sort of stepped on the other side, and this isn't disrespecting going to the bar or whatever, like I still go do that with my friends, but way less often, because I've recognized that there is a much more affordable experience that much more people are inclined to do, that literally is in our own backyards. And so and it's also super freaking good for you. So that has been, I think, a huge eye opener as far as lifestyle goes, and shown me that there are so many other things that I can do that cost absolutely no money, that are incredibly fun and good for you. And so to me, it's actually just scratching the surface of what else is possible. And so with this community and with this company, there are now so many other layers of things that we can now do as far as engaging in nature, whether it's going on a hike, paddleboarding, doing climbs, and I'm now just starting to realize all of the things that are possible to do that are right there. I point this way. My window's over here. I'm looking at my window.
But more or less what we took for granted.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I'm actually interested to hear, what you've sort of found as far as lifestyle goes when it comes to doing this stuff.
So for me, back in 2007, I had a life-changing injury, lost my job. I was very egocentric, money-driven, and I stayed trying to chase the money. So I transferred my part-time studies to full-time. Realized I couldn't go back into the job that I sort of loved, and created a full life plan for myself. And that really sort of took a dark turn. So the injury ended up in, I had an operation, and it ended up in clinical negligence because the operation went wrong. And I was on morphine for over 12 years, sleeping tablets. And the clinical negligence case went on for over 7 years. And that really took its toll on me, where, dark depression, drug and alcohol abuse, suicide, those things. And in 2014, after the case had been settled, I went to Germany. I had spinal stabilization because before I couldn't stand up straight. I've got nerve damage down my left leg, so my leg used to drag. And where it sort of on the 7 years, I'd sort of started getting arthritis in my hips. So I ended up having a hip operation, spinal stabilization. And that was really the first stages of physical recovery. But the mental trauma, what you was talking about, we have the good experiences and we also have the bad experience. I sort of trapped all this mental trauma inside my body. And that sort of, those patterns sort of went on for a few more years, to the point where I almost died from sort of long-term use of medication, and just to the point where my family thought they were going to get a call saying I'd been found dead. And I heard Wim Hof speaking on Joe Rogan. I was at the bottom of the barrel, found cold showers, did his 10-week program. And I haven't looked back since. The one thing that so I was in the shower, I was getting frustrated because I was living in Spain at the time. The temperature, so when you first start, 16, 18 degrees feels really cold. And then soon enough, I started getting used to it. And as the summer months were coming in, because it gets really warm in Marbella, we were soon up there, and I wasn't getting that endorphin release. I wasn't there, and it wasn't that long for me with the mental sort of trauma, the clarity that started coming back. And I got addicted to the clarity and that feeling. So, and I literally had an epiphany in the shower, and I was like, I'm going to create shower tech, like home technology that we can use, create a shower system that cools the natural water to improve cold therapy. Because where I was, to where I am now. That's my driving force. When I was like wanting to kill myself and I snapped out of it, my thing was, I'm going to do whatever I can so nobody has to suffer the way that I did. It went into like mental torture, just those patterns, those voices, just the stuff that you sort of, the perception that we have. And literally, cold therapy was my holy grail. Just literally transformed, got off all the medication. I don't even like pain-free. Don't get me wrong, I have like ups and down days, but from the medication I was on to being able to manage it through cold therapy, breath work, and positive mental chatter, you know, is, as you said, that once you've tasted the fruits, you know, and the fruits are free, they're in your home, you've got them already there. We've got a set of lungs, we can breathe. The hardest part is just the willingness to keep going in, you know, and keep going in. And that's the thing. And each day that we do, it gets easier. That's why I called this stepping into the cold, because it doesn't matter if it's stepping into the cold or we're stepping into those old programs, those habitual patterns. You know, you said at the start, repetition is the mother of all skill.
Yeah. And what a journey, by the way. That is an unbelievable story, man. And congratulations. I'm so happy you're here and with us, and you're able to create a solution to a lot of people's probably problems that they have, or even, you know, what I find so interesting about cold exposure, it's a solution you didn't think you needed, you know. And when you hop into the cold, you get that mental clarity, you get that physical clarity. And like what we've been saying, you know, it's free. It's you can step into your shower and get that. And, you know, I think one of the biggest challenges that most of us live day to day is that we're advertised that the solution to our problems is down the rabbit hole of many things, whether it's medication, whether it's stimulation, it's watching a show, it's drinking, it's getting lost down a dark rabbit hole. And a lot of it is actually, our solutions are escapism, right? Just escaping our internal feelings. And the hardest thing to advertise to someone is like, no. The solution is actually embracing whatever that is. And that's, I think, what the cold is. It's like your annoying buddy that you don't want to hear advice from because he's telling you everything that's true. It's that slap in the face. You're like, it hurts. It really hurts. But holy shit, do I feel? And it makes you feel. And, you know, I think in an era like, you know, I obviously was not in the position that you were in, but I think COVID has made it, you know, I think it was the great equalizer in most of us, where we all, no matter what walk of life you had, whether you had a lot of money, no money, wherever your job situation was, we all faced at some point a form of depression that almost felt like a complete tunnel where there was no sort of solution to. And myself, amongst many others now, can thank the cold as that friend being the slap in the face of, hey, this is actually the simple solution. And it's so funny though, because I feel like I've put blinders on to anything that has been the simple solution, the quick fix, because it all just sort of feels like it's a rabbit hole that it's like, well, now you got to buy this, you have to put on these new medications, you got to keep doing this thing. And it's like, nope, you can do it and really actually feel good for free. You can do it once and have your life changed, or you can do it every day and continually feel that you know, clarity. And I think at a time that everything feels so hazy, I think clarity is a priceless asset that most of us need right now. So really cool what you're doing with Cryo Shower too.
Thank you. And the good thing with the first product that we've got coming out is going to be so compact enough that you'll be able to chuck in your suitcase if you're going to a warm climate, because the shower system is the universal, the connector. So if you're in Jamaica, you'll be able to then pull it out your bag and then use it.
Oh my God, I need this. I need this so much.
I wanted, you mentioned, so my mind went blank just then. We skip that question. It's gone blank. If it comes back to me, I'll repeat it.
It's okay.
So, Zach, obviously, when I've had a look at your profile, and I might miss something out here, but you're an author, a fantastic photographer, a cold therapy advocate. You know, what is next on the horizon? What's Zach's outlook for the future?
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, that's a great way to sum it up. So yeah, this past year I published my first ever book, which was a huge milestone for me. And on top of that, I do filmmaking full time, so documentarian and full-time storyteller, YouTube channel as well. And the goal is to reach 100,000 subscribers before the end of the year, which we're really close to at 97,000. And the big thing is to make a feature-length movie, which is so outside of doing cold exposure or documentaries or any sort of biohacking. And we just finished shooting a short science fiction film, which we want to convert into a full-length movie. So which is like an hour-and-a-half film, something you probably see on Netflix. So that's sort of the next few steps. And it's really interesting how this wacky world of biohacking weaves its way into it. Like I'd say 30% of the collaborators on my latest short film were people I met in the cold water. You know, the guy who was doing behind the scenes on the movie was someone who's doing filming for our cold dipping. The person who's doing the VFX is someone who I met in cold water, you know? So it's really interesting that how these worlds sort of weave together and the amazing bonds that you're able to build. And I'd highly recommend anyone doing it, even just as like a networking thing. You know, I've had some friends find their life partners throughout it. And I've, you know, some people meeting their best friends and creating new connections, building businesses from it. So it's really a great backdrop to escalating things. And I got to think a lot of success that I've had, whether it was publishing my book, creating my latest short film, or whatever achievements that I accomplish in the future, to the foundation of seeking discomfort in the form of cold water and sort of pushing the envelope of my physical comforts, not only physically, but also socially. Like I'm not a huge social person, especially when it comes to winter. I like to hibernate, close my box and go just dive into computer screens or video screens. And so, you know, having an outlet where I can be social is really good for my trajectory. So those are sort of the things that are in the future. And who else knows? You know, I'm the kind of person who I like to plan probably like, I like to soft plan things, you know, a couple months ahead, but like concrete, nothing. Like it's always just like, what's going to happen tomorrow? What's going to happen in the next hour? You know, I think that's kind of how I've approached things. Maybe it's not the best way to live life, but it's the way that I've always felt the most comfortable. And so there's a lot of things on the plate, but nothing fully concrete as of yet. But hopefully some stuff comes on the horizon in the format of making movies.
Nice. So just I remember now what the question was. Yeah, you was talking about the community, how COVID brought about sort of depression sort of on a global scale. And I think that we haven't even, so the question really is about, we are going to need people like yourself, cold therapy advocates, that because we are the pandemic, the real pandemic, I believe, is going to be a mental health one globally. Once the financial crisis has all settled down and we do get to a place back to whatever the new normal will be, I think the younger generation that are coming up that have lost some serious time, like in school and communicating with friends and understanding like the real world, I think we're, you know, a decade from now is where we will really see the real sort of knock-on effect of what the last 2-3 years have had.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. I was going to lead into another question, but if you've got something on there, then please answer.
Yeah. So to your point about sort of the next pandemic or epidemic being a crisis of mental health, I completely agree. And I mean, we're dipping our toe into that water right now, for lack of better terms, with obviously, you know, I think each and every one of us probably has 1 to 5 friends who have experienced some severe issues of mental health. And, you know, it's been something that we've danced around for many years, and now it's obviously at the forefront of things. And COVID was just sort of the accelerator on that aspect. And I think the thing that we need to focus on is stability. You know, a lot of us, like you even shared, and myself, we're advertised financial stability, we're advertised future stability, relationship stability, and we're really dance around the big one, which is just self-stability. And that stability is something that we just put on the back burner consistently, where it's like, no, like I need financial stability in order to have self-stability. I need to have a relationship stability before I have self-stability. I have to make sure my friends are okay. I have to make sure everything else that is in arm's reach is okay before I'm okay. And it's because, you know, this is my own theory of this, but it's because it's much easier to manage things outside of your circle than it is to go deep inside. That's why, you know, a lot of us maybe step away from self-inner work, because it's scary shit. There's a lot of stuff buried deep down there. And whenever you have time, like sitting in your home, you know, for a year, when you have time that you didn't necessarily have before to distract yourself with the stimulations of work or going out or doing other things to sort of kill time and burn time, you have time to go inwards, and that's a scary place. And so, you know, I'm really hoping that more communities can grow like the ones that are here in Ontario that we have, where you can do that deep inner work and you have a friend to talk to who's willing to discuss those things with you, you know, because there's nothing worse than wanting and seeking to do this inner work and not having the community around you in order to help you do that. You know, I think we've all been in sort of those places where you're like, I'm screaming, but I'm basically screaming at a wall. And I'm actually, or I'm screaming, but there's a mask on and no one can actually see that I'm asking for help. And, you know, I think there's a saying that I've been telling myself more and more each day, and it only becomes more true, which is you are a product of your environment. And I mean that on a few different levels, but, you know, on the first and foremost, you're the makeup of the 5 people you surround yourself with, you're your community. And so if you're surrounded by people who don't want to do inner work and are willing to suppress those things, you are also going to suppress those things. And therefore, those mental health issues, whether it was something you grew up with, those struggles that maybe you're currently dealing with, or maybe they're just, you know, a mixture of both, those things are never going to come up. And so even if you have that one friend or that one podcast or that one therapist or something, you know, that you change your surroundings with just a little bit, is really able to help with that. And it's funny because now, you know, it's so funny because it's like the way I used to explain like, you know, neighborhoods in LA would be like, oh, this area is very like vegan. You know, it's like, it's very, as soon as you say that, you're like, okay, I kind of know what you're talking about here. And that's no disrespect to anybody who's vegan. I was vegan for like 5-6 years, but it explains a certain type of person, you know. And I now actually, it's so funny because I hate creating stereotypes or genres or boxes, but I feel like saying someone is a cold dipper or cold exposure person, you know who that person is. You're like, oh, that's my people. That's someone who is willing to do something uncomfortable, someone who's willing to step out of a comfort zone, someone who's willing to maybe discuss comfort zones. And it's so funny because any person in this community of now, you know, thousands of people that have now grown here, I know I could go to and have a deep conversation about the universe. We could go dive deep about biohacking. We could talk about our inner childhood problems, any one of them. And it truly is, I think, a representation of that product of environment, because not only is it the people that you're surrounding yourself with, it's the activities that you surround yourself with and the places that you put yourself with. When you're going into cold water, whether it's in your shower or in an ice hole, body of water, or a swimming pool, you're surrounding yourself with an element of nature, and that's water. And you know, it's been proven the therapeutic benefits of even just swimming and being in water. And so engaging with that at a full body, you know, experience, I think it puts us all on that common ground. And, you know, we talked about that with COVID being this like stressful situation that we've all, you know, we're the great connector. But when you have nature as that great connector, it really just creates the platform for good conversations and I think better mental health in the long run.
Wow. Thank you. Have you heard of a researcher called, in fact, I've got his book here. Masaru Emoto.
No.
The Secrets, the Secret Life of Water. And what he did
Cool.
is, so he said like love, gratitude to water, and it crystallized to sacred geometry.
Yes,
Have you
I've
heard
heard
some
of
of this? So that fascinates me. So Zach, I've got somebody, they're watching the podcast, you've inspired them, they're like, I want a piece of that. What are your words of encouragement to help somebody take that first step into the cold? Or they've gone in, they've got activated with the fight or flight response, and they're like, no way, I'm not doing that, it's too cold. What would you say to these people that are watching it, that they know that there's something there, they can see you radiating, they can see the joy in your face when you're talking about it? You know, what would you say to them to try and get them to step back in or step in for the first time?
Yeah, so I think there's something to be said about my timeline and what I grew up with here, because I grew up with a laundry list of food allergies, so much so that I was the cliche bubble boy, or if you talk about the kids who like rode the short bus, I was the person to do that. I had so many food allergies that I had to be fed through a tube in my stomach. When I was growing up, it was actually through my nose. I literally have, we're going to get graphic here, but I have a scar here from where my tube was until I was in grade 6. So probably the age of 12. I had to have a nurse that followed me around. And I was a really, really sick growing up. So much so that like activities like Christmas and my birthday would give me a seizure because there was just like so much excitement in my body. And you know, growing up with that sort of backdrop really made me feel like I couldn't do anything getting older, you know, and going into adulthood and going into then having certain independence, I felt that I was just so limited in doing anything. And so doing crazy activities like sports, I've always sort of ran away from. Anything sort of adrenaline related, I just thought, no, like I shouldn't step into that direction. And then something like cold exposure, I'm like, I'm a small, scrawny, sick kid who, and these are stories that I tell myself, as we all do before we go into doing anything exciting. But I would tell myself this consistently. I could probably get sick, probably gonna get hypothermia, maybe I'm gonna get a seizure, yada, yada, yada. All these things that I grew up with are now coming to the front of my brain before dipping into the cold water. And, you know, my profession, I sit in front of the computer all the time. I'm not some heroic warrior, six-pack dude doing these things. I am your probably key demographic of someone who would not do this.
Yeah.
And so speaking as someone who is the, you know, picture boy of someone who says, don't do cold exposure, I would say, if I can do it, you can do it, you know, and if I can do it with a smile on my face and do this, it really is something that anyone can honestly try. And, you know, not to say that that's sort of the words of encouragement to maybe play throughout your head when you go into it, but, you know, if you can't think of the benefits of the during, just be excited for what you'll feel after, and not the 5 minutes afterwards where you're shivering like, oh my God. But think of, you know, someone explained this to me when we were on a beach one freezing morning. She's like, I felt like I was levitating for the rest of the week. Like my feet weren't on the ground. And I mean, that feeling alone, it's like, what, there's not even a drug that you can do that makes you feel that good for a week. You know, there's nothing you can do that takes 2 minutes and then a week's benefit. So if you were to think about like the cost benefit type thing, like the feeling that I get when I'm done for 2 minutes is an hour's worth of a workout at the gym. You know, like what thing can you buy that takes 2 minutes that gives you a week's worth of benefits? There's nothing. Yep. There's nothing, and let alone that being for free. So whenever I play the sort of cost being discomfort, you know, pain, cold, shivering, all the things that go to the front of my brain, when I think if that's the cost, but then the product at the end that I get to buy lasts for a week and it only costs 2 minutes of pain, it's an easy play for me. So I always throw that into my brain whenever I start to get that monkey chatter, or even just these narratives that throw into the front of my mind, because chances are we all have the narratives. We, like my mom cold dips. She broke her back 2 years ago, and she's just doing tremendously better. But she gets muscle spasms that come back every now and again, and discomfort, as I'm sure you can probably relate to certain things. And when she does cold exposure, those things go away. But she could equally play out those narratives. She could say, I'm a 50-plus-year-old mom who, who has lived a life, who has had all these injuries, who's had a stroke, who has heart problems. I shouldn't do these things. Yeah. But she does them, and she feels tremendously better. So no matter what your narrative is, because you have one, and there's no disrespect to your narrative, but those who have equally as loud narratives still do these things and come out as heroes on top at the end, and not a hero to a community, not a hero to Instagram or YouTube, but a hero to yourself. And there's no other activity that I've ever done that has made me feel as much of a superhero than going into cold water for 2 minutes.
Wow. I just want to add one bit on there. I think one of the biggest things that sort of in that superhero analogy is moving from the ego self down to the felt sense, down to your heart, and just how empowering it is living in a different place, and then knowing that your ego is there for you to use at will. You create all these mental constructs and habits and new programs, and you're like, oh, there's my free will. I'm going to use that. I'm going to do that program. Zach.
Yeah. I just wanted to just touch on that real quick, because, our ego, our day-to-day lives, and this is similar to what the topic of my book that I wrote about, but we construct ourselves with layers, right? Just think of it as, it's a metaphor, but it's legitimate, is layers of clothing. You're like, I'm this brand name, I put this thing on me, I wear this mask, I'm a filmmaker, I'm an author, I'm these things. You play all these I ams of these material items that we, create about ourselves. When you go into the cold water, legitimately, you are naked, basically. You take your clothes off. So first off, you're on a beach in the middle of nowhere, freezing cold with no clothes on. That is a layer of vulnerability that, fraction of us even do to begin with. Then you take off even more layers when you go into the water, because that cold water gets deeper than your skin. It goes into your bones. And how often are you engaged to the level of your core, your bones? And so that is when your ego is literally like, your ego is naked. And there's not many times in your day-to-day where your ego is completely naked. And when it gets down to that vulnerable level, that's really when you can look at it from all angles and create that new relationship. And when you get to do it with other people, that's when you're in a naked ego cluster. Yeah. I'm going to start using that term. But when you're in that cluster of people who are completely vulnerable, you get to create these brand new bonds. And some of the connections that I've created in the cold water with complete strangers are stronger than those that I've had with friends for 5 to 10 years, which really is as an example of what experience can do for relationships, and maybe what you might be listening or might be missing out on in your life if you're listening to this. So I can't speak higher regards of this experience, because it is beneficial, but it does suck. And that's not something to dance around. It does suck, but I think a lot of us believe that if it sucks, then it's bad, but that's not necessarily true. We go to the gym to get gains, and it hurts to lift that final weight, but we do that because we know the benefits. So there's nothing different than running really hard on a treadmill till it hurts than going into cold water for 2 minutes. One just hurts more than the other, but both provide benefits.
Yeah, Zach, such wonderful insight. What we like to do on Stepping Into the Cold, we like to give the final closing words to you. Please let people know your handles, where they can find you, your book. We will list them in the comments, but in case it goes out to somewhere that hasn't a description, please let people know where they can find you. The floor is yours.
Oh, excellent. So thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's really been amazing being a part of this. And what you guys are doing is absolutely unreal. Your journey and your why is something that I think a lot of people will want to support. So my charger fell out, but I really appreciate being on here. And final words, for those of you who are listening, want to follow me on the internets, the social medias, it's at Zach Ramelan. So just my name. So on Instagram, YouTube channel, same sort of deal. And then the community that we have here in Toronto, run by Nick and Lisa, is Unbounded. I highly recommend taking a look at it. We're growing into other places around the world. And so if you have a cold body of water near you, you can always reach out to Unbounded to bring them out there. But they host retreats, big community dips in Ontario, Canada, and many other fun experiences down the pipeline. So Stay Unbounded is the place to follow all that fun stuff. But that's it. Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Zach, thank you so much. Thank you.